Right now, Justin Bieber feels like a completed myth. A kid who went from homemade YouTube covers to world stage dominance, turning Bieber Fever into a real chapter in pop history. But rewind, and then Justin was just a small-town teenager with a camera, a voice, and a comment section that could change his life overnight. That discovery story is real. He was found through YouTube, pulled into a fast-moving industry orbit, and suddenly the world was screaming his name. This Then versus Now isn't only about glow-up visuals. It's about the full arc, the historic early wins, the pressure of growing up as a global product, the public mistakes that became headlines, including legal trouble during the peak chaos years, and the health scares that forced everything to slow down. Stay to the end, because the biggest transformation wasn't fame, it was survival.
Before we rewind the tape, here's the promise. This is not a cute kid, famous guy slideshow. A real then versus now story only works when it explains why the change happened, what Justin gained, what fame demanded, and what it cost to grow up while the whole world watched. So we're tracking Justin through 3 lenses. 1. Breakthrough. Not just he got discovered, but how a small-town Canadian kid, born in Ontario and raised in Stratford, became a global name through YouTube momentum and the industry machine that followed. 2. Achievements. The moments that turned Bieber Fever into history, record-setting chart milestones, the early era where everything moved faster than normal careers are supposed to move, and the way he kept evolving from teen idol into a mainstream hitmaker. 3. Pressure, plus scandals. The part most timelines either sensationalize or skip. The years where fame stopped being shiny and started being heavy. Public controversy, legal trouble, and later the health setbacks that forced him to slow down and choose survival over momentum. By the end, we'll answer one big question. Did Justin change because he wanted to, or because the world left him no other way to survive? Now, let's go back to the beginning, before the screaming crowds, when it was just a kid, a camera, and a voice trying to reach beyond Stratford. Before the stadiums, before the screaming crowds, then Justin was just a kid in Ontario, born in London, raised in Stratford, growing up in a life that looked ordinary from the outside, but felt loud on the inside. He was raised by his mom, Patty, in a small-town rhythm where big dreams usually stay private. And yet music was never a casual hobby for him. It was the place he could control the world for a few minutes at a time. As a child, he taught himself instruments, drums, piano, guitar, trumpet, like he was building his own little band in his bedroom. And the early signs weren't about industry polish. They were about raw momentum, talent competitions, local performances, the kind of moments where you can feel an audience lean forward because they didn't expect that voice to come from that kid. In 2007, he entered a local singing competition and placed second. His mom posted the clip to YouTube, initially just for friends and family who couldn't be there. That small decision is the first domino. Because in the late 2000s internet, YouTube wasn't just a platform, it was an accelerator. The comments become a crowd, the views become proof. And suddenly, the distance between Stratford and the music industry shrinks to a screen you can refresh. Here's the part that feels unreal even now. The discovery wasn't a fairy tale audition on a TV stage. It was a manager stumbling onto clips online and realizing the kid had something the camera couldn't fake. Scooter Braun finds the videos during that 2007-2008 wave and starts tracking down who this teenager is and how to reach him. And then it becomes a sprint. Meetings happen fast. Adults start talking about contracts and labels, while Justin is still living in the emotional speed of a teenager whose life is changing before he can fully name what's happening. By 2008, the story grows into a real bidding war, one that ends with Usher helping bring Justin into the RBMG world, the business side of the new pop era. So, then Justin isn't just cute nostalgia. It's the most fragile phase of the whole timeline. A kid pulled out of normal life and pushed onto a conveyor belt that rewards success, but doesn't pause for childhood. And once that belt starts moving, it doesn't slow down. Not for anyone.
When Justin's early clips stopped being viral and started being a movement, the industry did what it always does to a teenage breakout. It sped everything up. The EP. My World wasn't just a debut. It was a launch pad that turned a kid from Stratford into a global name, fast enough that the world barely noticed he was still growing up in real time. My World sold more than 1 million copies, which is the kind of milestone that usually takes artists years, not months. And then comes the moment that seals the era. My World 2.0 hits, and suddenly the story becomes bigger than a discovery narrative. It becomes a chart narrative, a cultural narrative, a you-had-to-be-there pop moment. The album debuted at No. 1 on the Billboard 200, with a first-week surge that proved this wasn't just internet hype, it was mass attention that could move real numbers. That's how Bieber Fever forms, not from one song, but from the feeling that you're watching someone become famous everywhere at once. The singles start traveling faster than any normal promotional cycle. Fans don't simply listen, they organize. They refresh pages, they memorize lyrics, they turn appearances into events. And the machine responds by placing Justin everywhere. TV, radio, interviews, award shows, constant visibility. What looks like momentum is also pressure, because once a teen idol becomes a global headline, every day becomes a performance whether there's a stage or not. Baby becomes the symbol of that explosion, an early career track that reached the top 5 on Billboard's singles chart and turned Justin into a pop fixture, not just a new face. But the deeper shift is what happens behind the music. The rooms get bigger, the screaming gets louder, and the identity that felt natural online now has to survive a world that demands certainty. If you're sweet, you're manufactured. If you push back, you're ungrateful. If you change, you're fake. If you stay the same, you're stuck. That's the trap of fast fame, especially when you're still a teenager. So Justin adapts the only way a young superstar can, by building an armor out of performance. You can hear it in the way the early sound is designed to feel bright and effortless, even when the schedule isn't. You can see it in the way the public version of Justin becomes a symbol fans project onto, while the private version has less and less room to exist. And this is where the story quietly sets up the next chapter. Because the same speed that created the legend also created the cracks. There's a moment in every child star story where the timeline stops feeling like a rise and starts feeling like a collision. For Justin, it wasn't one bad night. It was the slow accumulation of pressure, years of being treated like a product, a punchline, a boyfriend, a meme, a target, until the public stopped seeing a kid who grew up too fast and started seeing a headline that never ends. And the internet doesn't do nuance, it does verdicts. By the early 2010s, Bieber Fever had already made him a global brand, but adulthood arrived with cameras still rolling. Every mistake became a trend. Every rumor became a storyline. Even the way he looked, tired, guarded, defiant, became evidence that something was wrong. And when you're famous at that scale, the world doesn't ask if you're okay. The world asks for content. That's why this era is the real breaking point in a then versus now narrative, because it's where Justin's identity gets fought over in public. The most visible crash moment came in 2014 when he was arrested in Miami Beach and faced charges that included DUI-related allegations and resisting an officer. The court outcome mattered, but the cultural impact mattered more. The image of a teen idol colliding with consequences became a permanent reference point, something people brought up for years, even when his life moved on. Around the same period, legal trouble and controversy became part of the public package. In one widely reported case tied to an egging incident at a neighbor's home, He later paid more than $80,000 in restitution connected to a misdemeanor vandalism charge. Whether people framed these moments as reckless or lost, the result was the same. The myth changed. Justin wasn't just the kid who got discovered on YouTube anymore. He became a case study in what happens when adolescence is lived under a microscope. And here's the part that makes this chapter uncomfortable. You can't separate the scandals from the speed. He didn't get time to become an adult privately. He became an adult as an ongoing public debate. So the transformation wasn't only musical or visual, it was emotional. You can almost feel the shift, the sweetness hardening into armor, the openness turning into distance, the teenager learning, too early, that being watched is not the same as being understood. But this isn't the end of the story, because after the chaos years, Justin's biggest change wasn't cleaning up his image. It was learning what it costs to keep going and what happens when your body eventually forces you to stop. If the chaos era made Justin a headline, the now era is the part where he tries to become a human again, without losing the career that was built faster than any childhood could handle. And the most surprising thing is this: the comeback didn't come from acting tougher. It came from sounding clearer. When purpose arrives, it doesn't feel like a reset button. It feels like a public turning point, music built to move forward, not just relive the teen idol past. What Do You Mean becomes a defining moment because it debuts at #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, his first no. One there, and it signals something bigger than a hit. The machine is still powerful, but now it's pointed toward reinvention. And from there, the achievements start stacking in a different way. Justin isn't only surviving attention, Justin is shaping mainstream pop again. By 2021, Justice debuts at #1 on the Billboard 200, and Peaches hits no. 1 on the Hot 100 in the same week, turning the era into another proof of power moment. The story changes from former teen idol to adult hitmaker who can still dominate the charts. But here's what the glossy timeline can't hide. The cost doesn't vanish just because the music stabilizes. In 2020, Justin publicly revealed he'd been diagnosed with Lyme disease and said it had been a rough period health-wise. That matters because it reframes the "why did he disappear" questions into something more real. Sometimes the biggest battle isn't public opinion. It's your nervous system, your energy, your ability to function normally while the world still expects a show. Then, in 2022, Justin announced he had Ramsay-Hunt syndrome and was experiencing facial paralysis, forcing concert postponements and a halt to performing as his body demanded recovery. And in 2023, the tour timeline shifts again with announcements about postponements and remaining dates being canceled. So this is what Now Justin really is. Not a perfect redemption arc, not a clean before and after, but a man trying to hold two truths at once: massive achievement on paper and a private reality that sometimes requires stepping away. Which leads to the final chapter, the one that makes this whole then versus now storyland. After fame, scandal, success, and survival, what actually stayed the same? If you strip away the hysteria, the scandals, the chart headlines, and the think pieces, the core of Justin Bieber is still the same thing it was in those early YouTube clips: a kid who wanted to be heard. The voice was always the gateway, first as raw talent, then as a global brand, and later as a lifeline back to something real when fame got too loud. What changed from then to now is scale and consequence. Then Justin could upload a video and dream. Now Justin has to live with the fact that millions of people feel entitled to his mistakes, his marriage, his health, and his silence. The achievements are undeniable. The controversies are real. But the biggest transformation isn't the fame. It's the awareness that survival sometimes means stepping back, even when the world still demands a show. So did Justin change because he wanted to, or because he had to? Probably both.